And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service in Alaska region, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Sunday, January 26, 2025. And we have coming up here in the early week a strong northerly flow of air through the Bering Strait. We start with the sea ice edge, and as a result of these strong northerly winds, we have blizzard warnings in effect for the western Seward Peninsula, winter weather advisories up here, Shishmaref up toward Kivalina, Point Hope. We'll likely see some Polinias opening up here south of Wales and Steller, and then down on the south side there of St. Lawrence Island and some areas of Norton Sound. Further south, with the warm intrusion of air that came up this past weekend up over the southwest, including Bristol Bay and up into Cook Inlet, we have little ice, if any, left there, and even a lot melted off within Kuskokwim Bay, but the ice will make an advance southward again here early in the week on Monday and Tuesday as we get Arctic air that'll be pushed inland as a cold front sweeps inland after the low pressure that's currently coming on shore this Sunday evening right here into the southwest. That'll lift further northward during the day on Monday. So here we have that low later tonight, early Monday morning, coming up from around Cape Newingham and then into the south and western interior. This low has a couple of fronts with it. The first occluded front will be in the process of weakening, but spreading snow to the northern panhandle and some rain on the outer coast. And then a secondary cold front will be pushing eastward as we go into the day on Monday and into Tuesday. But the thing is, this low will kind of split. One center kind of pulling back toward Kotzebue Sound and just north of there along the south slopes of the western Brooks Range, and then the main low approaching the Alcan border with kind of a string of weaker lows further east into far northern Canada, and then this final front pushing on through by Monday afternoon, and after that a much quieter but considerably colder weather pattern setting up here across the interior. Some locations will be in the 20s and 30s below for Wednesday and Thursday morning, so get ready for a really big change there. And then we have another low with moisture coming up into colder air here. Northern central panhandle could be some snow there on Tuesday into Wednesday, and rain, especially southern areas. So that system will be out there at least impacting the southeast for a change, and another little low coming across the Alaska Peninsula. More importantly, we'll be watching this system because there will be a stronger low come up through the western Bering, and that'll bring a push of milder air up into the southwest while bringing another round of snow and wind to areas of the west and northwest coast by the end of the week, especially Friday into early Saturday to begin the early weekend. But for Monday, we have the one front that'll be pushing in through the panhandle with snow or a little bit of a mix of precipitation north central areas and then more rain southern areas. And winds will be southeast to south 10 to 15 knots over the southern portion of the panhandle. Look for inner channel south winds 20, 25 knots, though gust to 40 knots there in Lynn Canal with waves 4 or 5 feet. For the outer coast west of Sitka and up toward Cape Suckling, southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. And then on Tuesday, winds will come down, still about southeast to south 20-knot winds, Dixon entrance, waves 4 feet just outside there of Metlakatla, 8 feet off of Craig, and then southeast to south winds 10 to 15 knots, Stevens Passage up through Lynn Canal, 2 to 3 foot waves, and then kind of a mixed bag of winds along the coast. We're looking at west-northwest winds, generally about 15 knots, Sitka up through outside there of Yakutat Bay. And then for the northwestern Gulf, including Prince William Sound as well as Cook Inlet, strong southwest flow. As that front lifts northeast, we're going to see 40-knot southwesterly winds outside of Hinchinbrook entrance and off the Kenai coast with waves 18 to 22 feet. Here in this region, strong southwest winds, 35 to 40-knot gales. And again, the Homer Spit with that southwest wind. High tide on Monday is around 12:30 p.m. You factor in waves 8 to 13 feet, and there certainly could be some waves break over that spit there, so just keep that in mind, those of you down in Homer. And then up the length of the inlet, even 40-knot southwest winds all the way up toward Anchorage, especially there on the west and south sides. And for Tuesday, winds come down across the region. Look for south-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, Prince William Sound outside of Hinchinbrook entrance. West-northwest winds along the upper portion of Cook Inlet at 10 to 15 knots, northwest winds 25 knots there across lower Cook Inlet with waves 4 to 5 feet. Now across the areas of the southwest, Kodiak Island will have southwesterly gales of 35 knots on Monday. As we trail out along the Alaska Peninsula, those winds will come down from the upper portion, 30 knots there, Bristol Bay, east toward Chicknick, and then falling off to 20 knots either side, Cold Bay and False Pass. For Tuesday, we have that little low feature that's going to be kind of squirrely and coming through. On the front side of it, northwest winds around 15 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island. Kind of a mixed bag, Bristol Bay, east of Chicknick, but then those winds 35 knots southeast there. Once you get to kind of the middle area there on the Bering side, switching back to the northwest, 35 knots, Cold Bay down to False Pass. Waves could be 8 to 14 feet there on the Bering side. For the Aleutians, there's a hint of that feature Monday. Winds will generally be out of the west-northwest around 20 knots. Could be as high as 25 knots there just west of Adak. And then on Tuesday, we find northwesterly gales on Alaska Dutch Harbor, northerly winds 20 knots Nikolsky, and then turning back to the southeast, 25 knots in the middle Aleutians. West of Adak, we have generally southeast to east gales, 35 to 40 knots in advance of the next system that's yet well to the west-southwest of the Aleutians. Now across the southwest coast, eastern Bering on Monday, we have brisk northwesterly flow right around 30 knots, and this is bringing in sub-zero air temperatures into the interior. This front, as it crosses, I mentioned in the public weather segment, McGrath has had a very rare heavy freezing rain event. There's ice accumulations well in excess of an inch in that area around McGrath. When these strong winds hit there, that could bring down trees and power lines and any structures that are weighted down with heavy icing. But back here along the southeast central Bering, look for heavy to extreme freezing spray as very cold air works its way south and eastward. Northwest winds 25 knots, Pribilov's up to St. Matthew. And then on Tuesday, still brisk winds along the southwest coast from Norton Sound, lower Yukon Delta, 25 knot northwest winds. And then generally north winds out of Kuskokwim Bay, 20 knot northeasterly winds out of Bristol Bay, and kind of a mix of northeast or northwest winds to 25 knots there at both St. Matthew and down towards St. Paul and St. George. Finally, through the Bering Strait, this region, the western Seward Peninsula, under a blizzard warning tonight into the day on Monday because of north-northwest 40-knot gales with gusts up to 50 knots will cause blizzard conditions along with some light snow, but mainly the wind action there. Those strong winds will also help to open up some polynyas. We find winds even 35 knots up through the central Chukchi Sea. But finally, as we get up toward Utqiagvik and Prudhoe Bay, winds northeast 15 knots, becoming easterly to 25 knots at Kaktovik. And on Tuesday, winds come down along the Beaufort Sea coast, generally westerly 10 knots there, Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik. North winds Utqiagvik down through Cape Lisburne at 10 to 15 knots, but then picking up again, up 25 to 30 knots through the Bering Strait. And again, we have ice in place, not as strong of winds as what happens on Monday, but beware, another stronger storm with wind and snow will be moving into this region late in the week, especially Friday into early Saturday as kind of a heads up. So I hope you have a great week ahead and stay safe as we've had a lot of active weather across the state.